Are you ready to see how I take the images that I collected from nature, that I turned into Thermofax screens to be printed on fabric? If so, keep watching and I'll show you how I did it. Hi, I'm Angie. I'm a mixed media textile artist, and in this series, I'm taking items that I've collected from nature on my morning walks, items like leaves and seed pods and feathers, and I took those items and I turned them into black and white images and made a Thermofax silkscreen. And in this video, we're going to take those screens and print them on our rust-dyed fabric. So if you haven't watched the two previous videos, I recommend that you go back and watch those so you can see what I've done so far. So the colors that I'm going to be working with in this series are a series of rusty, mustardy grays that I've mixed up for printing on my rust-dyed fabrics. I'm printing with acrylic paints, and I usually like to custom mix my colors. Now, I had mixed up some colors in the past, and while they were almost there, they just wasn't quite what I wanted. And it took me some time to figure it out, but what I realized when I mixed those colors, I used the primary colors to mix them, red, blue, and yellow. And I doubled them down as much as I could, but they still wasn't quite right. They didn't quite work with the earthy tones of the rust fabric. So what I finally realized was I needed to have used some earthy tone pigments instead of the primary pigments. I should have used colors like raw umber and burnt umber and the siennas and the ochres. Now, I didn't want to throw all of that paint out, so I decided to take some of those earthy pigments and mix them in with the colors that I already had to see if that would work so that I didn't have to throw it out, and it worked. So here is a piece of fabric. On the left is the original color, and on the right is the color that I modified with the earthy pigments. Now, there's not a whole lot of difference in them, but I find that I like the color on the right just a little better than I do the one on the left. The color on the left would have been acceptable, but to my eye, it just wasn't what I was looking for. So we're going to start out with a mustardy yellow color that blends in with the background. So I don't want my background print to overtake the fabric. I want something that kind of blends in. You can see it, but it's going to be very subtle. So for the background pattern itself, I've chosen this texture that will complement the dyed texture of the fabric and not overwhelm it. So I'm going to print that as the first layer and then let that layer dry before moving on to the second layer. Now for the second layer, I'm going to take the darker, heavier image that I created in Adobe Capture, and that image is sort of like a silhouette. And I'm going to print that on over the background, and this is going to be in a dark gray that I mixed up, and I added just a touch of brown to it to warm it up so that it would work better with the rust-dyed fabric. So the silhouette print will add some structure and contrast to the texture pattern that I printed on in the mustard yellow. And the gray creates a strong shape that stands out without overpowering everything else. If I'd have went with straight black, I think that would have been just too much contrast. So this layer is the detailed print in white, and it sits on top of the silhouette, and it adds some brightness that makes the design stand out. When I was first experimenting with this, I tried putting in deeper colors on top of the gray, and it just wasn't enough contrast. And I realized I needed that contrast of the white. So that's the entire printing process. We chose our colors, mustard yellow, a gray with a touch of brown, and some white. We printed our detail background first, then added on the silhouette print and added some detail in white on top of that. After everything is nice and dry and cured, it's time to heat set the print. And you just use your household iron and you just iron over and heat set it, or you can let it sit for a couple of weeks and it will cure naturally. Well, guys, I hope you've enjoyed this series. So far, we've taken items that have been collected in nature, taken them into a phone app, and converted them into a black and white image that can be made into a Thermofax silkscreen. Then we made our Thermofax silkscreen, and today we screen printed those images on fabric. I hope you've enjoyed this series. And like I said, if you have not watched the first two videos, go back and watch those. And if you want more information about rust dyeing on fabric, check out my course link in the description down below. And check out the rest of the videos on my YouTube channel and check out my blog. There's a lot of information on there too. I hope to see you back in the next video, which will be the final video in this series. But until then, have a beautiful, beautiful day. Bye-bye now.